be Yael Karshon, and her topic, geometric quantization with metaplectic construction.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And since this is the last talk, let's thank the organizers, Lilia Wu, Richard Goodman, and Sheng Yao. Okay.
It's not here.
No, but I told him that this was
Okay.
channels. There he is. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about a theme which goes back to the 1970s. In various forms. Ideas having to do with using metaplectic-c structures in geometric quantization, and different forms of these ideas have appeared over the year in different ways. Recent papers by Prada and Byrne have a lot of this idea, like, again, different aspects of the idea there. Robinson, Ronsley wrote a paper where they give credit for earlier ideas by Sis in 1977 and Harold Hess in 1980. And my personal hero is Harold Hess. This is a paper I only kind of learned about maybe a year ago, 3.5 ago, maybe, and that deserves a lot more attention than it actually got. This is a guy apparently sort of disappeared. I think he did a PhD and disappeared or something, but this is a guy, a paper worth a lot of attention. I think a lot of the later people, I suspect, didn't quite understand what he was doing. So I have a few aspects of this metaplectic-c theme in mind, and I might not get to all of them. I probably won't get to all of them, so let me at least mention a few things. So I'm hoping to get to Harold Hess, but maybe not, depending on times. Let me tell you what the metaplectic-c group is. C does not stand for complex numbers. It might stand for central extension, I'm not sure. So we have a standard model symplectic vector space. We've got the metaplectic group, which is the non-trivial double covering. Z2 is the center, and the C is a corresponding circle extension of the symplectic linear group. So we can view it in two ways. We can think of S1 sitting there as a center, just by setting the MP component to be trivial. So I think I'm being ambiguous whether to write V comma omega or just V, using both notations. And the quotient is the symplectic real group of real linear symplectic transformations. On the other hand, we can think of the metaplectic group as sitting inside the metaplectic-c group, the quotient being an S1, but it's not the same as 1. If you include and then project, that's a squaring map. Similarly, if you include, then project, that's double covering, metaplectic-c double covers symplectic. And I should mention, this is very, very close to the notion of the spin C group, which appears as well in this context. Let me just say, at this point, we're taking V to be R2N equipped with an inner product, just a standard Euclidean structure and standard orientation. So, complete analogy. Spin group is the non-trivial double covering of the special orthogonal group. Spin C is the corresponding central extension of the special orthogonal group. And we have the similar diagrams. Now, as soon as you have spin C in the central extension of SO, you can try to lift this to families, or more specifically, if you have a bundle whose fibers, a vector bundle whose fibers are oriented in Euclidean, its structure group is a special orthogonal group, and you can ask for a lifting of its structure group to the spin C group. A lifting to the spin group would be a spin structure, a lifting to the spin C group would be a spin C structure. This is formulated a little bit differently than, I think it was Eckhart in your talk, whereas he describes spin C structure in different language, so I'm describing it in a least theoretic way to emphasize the analogy. Forgot to set my timer. So let's spell out what this is on the vector bundle. And then, of course, we will eventually be interested in the symplectic manifold, and the vector bundle will be just the tangent bundle. So what is an MPC vector bundle? You're starting the symplectic vector bundle, namely we have a fiberwise symplectic structure. We then have the corresponding principal bundle, whose group is the group of linear symplectic transformations. So let me write its fiber at a point as the space of all linear symplectic isomorphisms between the model vector space. Let me put a little subscript V to emphasize this is the model vector space on one hand, and the fiber over that point on the other hand. And this is acted upon by symplectic isomorphism of V, freely intransitively. So by definition, an MPC structure here will be the following. So we have now a principal bundle for the group SPV, and an MPC structure will be a principal bundle for the group. For the metaplectic-c group, together with a map to the principal symplectic bundle, which is equivariant in the sense that if you act by an element of MPC and then map, that's the same thing as first mapping and then acting by its image in the symplectic. And as well, we insist that this be a principal circle bundle in such a way that the principal circle action is just the center of MPC acting. So fiber-wise, we have the same picture that we had on the least theoretic level. And then MPC structure on the symplectic manifold, by definition, is an MPC structure on its tangent bundle. And these are the structures that we will work with. So forth. So this is, and in fact, the piece I erased is so important that I'm sort of thinking maybe I should actually keep it. Let me put it sort of somewhere and keep it. This little neat theoretic diagram. Now, there's something here which might remind us a little bit of Kostant-Souriau prequantization, in the sense that we do have a circle bundle. This is not a circle bundle on the manifold, this is a circle bundle on the overframe bundle, but let's make the analogy even stronger. I will give the definition of a central connection . What Harold Hess calls a pseudo connection, I believe. So this will be a differential one form in the total space of the principal MPC bundle. Let's write down the rest of the picture here and that. We can think about this as because S1 is in the center, we can think of this as a principal circle bundle over SPE. Oh, I'm sorry. I could have done it with an E. Actually, no, let me do it with an E. I think this is I'm sorry about that. This generality is actually okay at this point. So we can think about this as a principal circle bundle over SPE, which is equivariant with respect to an action of MPV. That is because these two actions commute, because S1 was in the center. So we insist that this guy be a connection one form as a circle bundle, and be moreover MPC, metaplectic-c invariant. But we insist a little bit more. If we look at the other diagram, which I have erased. The metaplectic group sits inside the metaplectic-c group. If you look at the orbits for the, like you take the principal action and take the orbits of the metaplectic group, these will be double coverings of the orbits, principal orbits of the symplectic group. So if you take this circle bundle and you restrict it to the preimage of just a single point, because the MPC structure makes it into a flat bundle, but not a trivial bundle, but a flat bundle, where the horizontal directions are just the MPC directions, and I insist that the connection one form actually respect that. So I insist that the MP orbits are horizontal.
Wait, you said flat bundle?
Sorry.
So the group, if I just restrict to everything which is above a single point. Here we have a group acting freely and transitively.
You didn't. The statement of the flat bundle was P over SPE?
Was over a single x.
Ah, okay.
Just when you restrict to a single x.
Okay.
And when you start moving different x's, well, that's where gamma is making an effect. Now, these properties imply that d of gamma is basic with respect to the projection to M. So there's this two-form on M such that, let me put a minus sign to try to be consistent. That probably won't be entirely consistent with conventions. So the d of gamma is minus the pullback of this guy. And this is an analogy with Kostant-Souriau prequantization. And this will be the two-form that we care about in two different ways. First of all, we will insist that this two-form is symplectic, and we will work with E being the tangent bundle. And secondly, we would like gammas whose curvature is that very same two-form. So the two-form is playing two roles here. I want to say a few words about what people call spin-C quantization, because I think a lot of people some people in the audience, as well as the speaker, have used this terminology before in different contexts, and there's a little bit of an ambiguity with what we mean when we say spin-C quantization. And here I want to say a few words about the index theoretic approach to geometric quantization, which flourished quite a bit in the 1990s. Very much I think I learned it from Victor Gilliman, and it was a huge contribution of Eckhart in terms of quantization commutes with reduction for this index theoretic approach. Let me say a few words about that and what it has to do with the type of structures I'm talking about. You have a symplectic manifold and a compatible complex structure. So this is just a Kähler manifold. I'm starting with that. And then you can do the traditional Kostant-Souriau prequantization. You would take a Hermitian line bundle equipped with a Hermitian connection whose curvature is a symplectic form. Of course, this exists if and only if the homology class is integral. But we already sort of mentioned that in the story I drew here, there is an integrality condition, but it's not quite the same. Maybe I'll say what the integrality condition here is. If you start, no, let me not say it yet. Now, the connection combined with the complex structure downstairs gives rise to a complex structure on the line bundle, making it a holomorphic line bundle. Again, I learned this from Yael Strumper. And what do you declare as your quantization? This is what many people do. So first of all, if you look at some old-fashioned approaches to quantization, you want to produce a Hilbert space, and the Hilbert space that you will produce here is a space of holomorphic sections. You might assume here that the manifold is compact, just to not get into trouble. That's a state that can be written as the zeroth cohomology of the sheaf of holomorphic sections. And it can also be written as a kernel of differentiable operator, namely the twisted-Deveau operator, which goes from functions, sections, namely zero forms with coefficients in the line bundle, to one forms, in fact, zero one forms with coefficients in the line. One that goes one step further and says, oh, eventually I'd like to produce something which is doesn't depend on too many choices. And we know from Bott or from Kostant that a less sensitive object would be the alternating sum of the cohomologies. This has a huge disadvantage in that we've now lost the actual, we can't hold on to the vector space. This is a virtual vector space, formal difference of vector spaces. Maybe in the presence of group actions that preserves all the structure, you get the formal difference of representation, but like you can't, it's sort of much more abstract. You can't talk about automorphisms of guys like this. On the other hand, you do gain something because now this game you can play in much more bigger generality. You express this alternating sum as the index, namely kernel minus co-kernel of the Dirac-Dolbeau operator. I can write it in this way, which goes from 0 even forms to 0 odd forms. And as soon as you've done that, you no longer need your complex structure to be integrable. You can do this with almost complex structures. And that is a generality where I think eventually Edgard proved that quantization comes to a reduction. So this is the nice stuff. Now, why does the word spin C? And so there's some people that call this the spin C quantization of the symplectic manifold they started with. And I'm going to somewhat object to that, but I'm going to explain why. Why is this called, but this is very, very commonly used by many, many people. Why is this called spin C quantization? Because, in fact, if you have the symplectic structure as well as the Kähler structure, gives rise to a spin C structure on M. And as soon as you have a spin C structure, some very mild choices which do not affect the final answer, we'll be getting a limited differential operator, so-called a Dirac spin C operator. And if the spin C structure happens to be the one that we just coming from, I'm sorry, actually let me add here the line bundle. If it happens to come from the data we started with, this is in fact the same thing as the operator that we described before. So you can call it spin C operator because it really is a spin C Dirac operator. But where is it that I would like to, where is it that there's different versions which are not entirely consistent? The question is, what is this a quantization of? So for many people, define the, let's take this, well, let me say maybe the space of holomorphic sections, or maybe the index of the Dirac-Dolbeau operator, and they declare that to be the quantization and this does have very nice properties. But what is the other version? The other version is when you introduce something called the half-form correction. Again, quite, which does go back to the 70s, I believe, in geometric quantization. So this is now the other version. So this is a certain piece in the geometric quantization recipe, and according to this piece, the quantization of our symplectic manifold that we just described should not be the sections of L, but rather sections of something a little bit different. You want to take L and you want to tensor it with the dual of a square root of the canonical line bundle. So K here is just the top complex wedge of the cotangent bundle. Sorry?
Mhm.
So sections of the canonical bundle are just holomorphic differential, not holomorphic, N0 forms where N is the top degree. So this is not quite the same. So if you really want holomorphic sections of the original bundle, that should serve us as a quantization of something a little bit different. That should be the quantization of an omega for a slightly different omega. So here omega has to be the curvature of L plus half the curvature of the canonical line bundle. And this is the other version of spin-C quantization. Now, with this version, though, this true form might not be integral. So you're not changing the integrality condition on your two form with this version. Another nice piece is we mentioned that to describe the quantization, let me actually say, I'm sorry, or let me put both the sections version and the index version. I mentioned that this Dirac spin-C operator, you just need a spin-C structure for it. You don't need to know what J was or what the line bundle was. You just need the spin-C structure. And it turns out that this two form, you can actually recover it from the spin-C structure. This is just the curvature of a central connection, which I defined on the board earlier. So you really don't need that much data. You can start with a spin-C structure, make sense of this, and it works in more generality because you're allowing two forms. Well, I don't know if I'd say more generality, but it's a little bit different. Whereas this guy requires a certain choice, you need to be able to take a square root of the canonical bundle. So you would get that, for example, if you had a metaplectic structure or spin structure. If you want to do the index theoretic version, then you don't need that choice at all. Then suddenly you're working in a more general situation. So this guy requires a metaplectic-c structure, or if you wish, a spin-C structure, which is a lot easier. For example, suppose you wanted to quantize Cpn where n is even, you will not have a metaplectic structure, you will have a metaplectic-c structure. So this is good news. And both of these versions exist in the literature, which can be a little bit confusing. So on the quantum side, they're the same. On the classical side, what is symplectic manifold that you're quantizing, they're a little bit different. Questions? So let me talk a little bit now about this half form. Actually, no, let me just state a fact. Let me give you a definition. A spin C prequantization of a symplectic manifold. I'm sorry, I want a metaplectic-c. I'm sorry, I want metaplectic-c. There we go. This one. Here's my principal SP bundle. I'd like a metaplectic-c structure on the tangent bundle. And a central connection such that the curvature of the central connection up to various sign and constant conventions is just a callback of the symplectic form. And the point is, such a guy exists if and only if the cohomology class of omega plus half C first term class of the cohomology class of the tangent bundle is integral. So if you go back to the old Kostant-Souriau approaches, to have a prequantization line bundle in the Kostant-Souriau sense requires the first element to be integral. To be able to form the the half form correction, which I did not completely define, but that's another piece of that recipe. You need half the first term class to be integral, but in this metaplectic-c approach, you only need their sum to be integral, which is a little bit more general. So you can do CP2, for example. Now, the same thing we can do with some additional symmetries. For example, you might have a Hamiltonian group action on M that naturally lifts to the frame bundle. And you might insist that this whole structure be acted upon by that same group, and everything be a variant of that group action be correct. So there's a notion of equivariant prequantization that will remember more information if you then, yeah. Let me give you an example. Now this is an example that in some sense appeared in my paper, one of my two papers with my Grosberg back in the 1990s, but really, if you really want to see details, including ones that we did not check, including statements that we did not quite commit to, there's a recent preprint by Jennifer Vaughn, which actually works this out. This is the case of joint manifolds. Just to illustrate it with some pictures. That's with some pictures. So I think a lot of us know what symplectic mort manifolds are, but let me just recall that symplectic mort manifolds are symplectic manifolds equipped with torus actions. Torus is half the dimension of the manifold.
Sorry, can I ask you?
Sure.
It got stuck there.
Yeah.
So you define the Dirac operator there by taking the Clifford.
Yeah, I was being a little bit ambiguous. I was going back and forth between spin C and metaplectic-c.
But my guess is metaplectic-c, you're now going to use omega as a quadratic form to define the Clifford algebra.
So for me, I'm not. Yeah, eventually. Okay. So this is. If you did spin C, if you wanted spin. So for example, suppose you had. Okay. What do I want to say? I'm reading something under the rug. Eventually, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
No, I mean, my worry is that if you use omega instead of just the metric, in the spin C case, you can have a Riemannian metric, no? And you get a Dirac operator which is elliptic, but that's because the metric is not degenerate.
Yeah, no, so here, I want to, when you have a spin C structure, what I said before about sin-spin quantization refers to a situation where you actually have a spin C structure. So in particular, this would be interesting in situations, for example, where you have an actual complex structure, or maybe almost complex structure, and you had a compact group acting which preserves everything, then you do the spin C. How do you deal with the metaplectic-c in contrast to the spin C? So there's a difficult answer of Robinson-Ronsley, and there's an easy answer of Harold Hess.
Okay.
But these are a little bit different.
You get out an elliptic operator out of the symplectic form? Like without passing through Riemannian metric. I mean, it seems
so you will need additional choices. No, you will need a choice.
Okay.
You will need a choice. And the choice might be that of a compound complex structure, or it might be that of a more general so-called polarization. For example, Lagrangian vibration. There's different choices you could do that will allow you to get some guide whose sections you want to take. So I did not tell you what the operator is. It might not be an elliptic operator. And so the story with, when I talk about index of an elliptic operator, that is specifically when you have a compatible, almost complex structure, and to get some richness of the information, you would be equipping everything with compact group actions, if you want to do the index story. Otherwise, there's something else to do, which I'm hoping to, I don't know, we'll see. I mean, I don't think I'll get to everything, but yeah. So in fact, I think you're keeping me honest here because I want my symplectic curve manifolds, they're also going to be Kähler. So it will be, I am working in a situation where I can actually work with a spin C structure. And symplectic quantum manifold has a momentum map. The target space is the goal of the Yael of the torus, which is just Rn, and it comes with a lattice. And the lattice is actually pretty important. And the point is that the image of the momentum map is this delta, which I kept putting as indices everywhere, and this is so-called a unimodular convex polytope. So those of you who are familiar, the unimodular is just what we call the Dalzan condition. And you can go back and forth. If you know the polytope, you can build a manifold. If you want the manifold, this is Dalzan's theorem. So let's just say a few words about what is this quantizability condition and what you got. If you want to do Kostant-Souriau without half-forms, and you're asking whether this manifold is equivariantly prequantizable, the situation of an equivariant prequantization, like this. The lifting of the group action actually gives us a momentum map. So we want the momentum map to remember the lifted action. And this holds if and only if the polytope is integral. So let me draw a picture of an integral polytope. Here's my lattice. That's an example of an integral polytope, and this happens to be CP2. Now, if you, and in this case, the quantization, if you use a Kähler structure, you want to do spin C quantization, what you get is, for each lattice point in the polytope, you get a one-dimensional vector space in which the torus acts with weight alpha. So this is, some speakers before me have mentioned that story. If you do constant Kostant-Souriau prequantization with a half-fold correction, then in fact these guys are never equivariantly frequentizable. But if you take the spin-C approach or metaplectic-c approach, then you get the same lattice points, but the Pareto becomes a little bit bigger, just a tiny bit bigger. You're adding something. So this guy will be equivariantly MPC frequentizable, and this is explained with, and actually checked in Jennifer's paper. We call this a halfway lattice Pareto. So the facets, in this case edges, lie exactly halfway between lattice points. They never hit lattice points. You still get the very same quantization, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. It's the same quantizations and lattice points inside. So this is true whether you take the spin-C index approach, or also if you take the real polarization, you take the Karshon leaves, that is in Jennifer's paper. But now there's nothing on the boundary. And these guys also have some interesting combinatorics. I think Jonathan mentioned some Euler-Maclaurin formulas. You've got Euler-Maclaurin formulas for these quadruples. Those of you that know what these are, where the Todd operator is replaced by the Aboof operator. Except that has not been written down. It's been, it's Prince of Blah. It's old, it's not. You've got a version of Pick's formula, which is different from the usual ones. In the unimodular case, we don't know a version of Pick's formula in the non-unimodular case, but in the unimodular case. It's kind of cute. Okay. So that was a little bit of pictures, and I want to tell you now, this index stories, they're in the 1990s, and I want to go back to the 1970s. I kind of like the old stuff better. Somehow it's stuff you can actually hold on to. So I want to go back to the 1970s and talk about a little bit about geometric quantization, and I will be now letting go of spin-C, and I will be returning to metaplectic-c. If you have a symplectic manifold, you've got the Poisson algebra of smooth functions on it, and you're looking for a natural way to associate to functions operators on some Hilbert space. And you might insist that this respect the brackets, which means that you will be looking for some natural way. Respecting brackets just means that this Lie algebra is somehow supposed to act in some natural way in a vector space, in Hilbert space. With my convention, it would be through skew adjoint operators. And you might want to ask certain properties to be true. So for example, one of the properties that people want to be true based on a lot of examples is that if you have a subalgebra that acts transitively, for example, the infinitesimal action from a transitive group action, then you want this action of that subalgebra to be irreducible, and then we know that that cannot be done. There's the no-pope theorem of Grunwald and Van Hove, and then people start to compromise and say, okay, so how do we still get as close as possible to this goal? And there's two ways of doing it. One is a version where you compromise on this being a linear, on this being the algebra action. You require that Poisson bracket go commutator only up to Planck's constant, and that ties us with some of the semi-classical themes that Alejandro was telling us about. Another compromise, which is the one I want to be focusing about, is the one that people do when they do Hamiltonian group actions, when you actually want an honest-to-God actions, but you're willing to compromise and just quantize a smaller subalgebra of the Poisson algebra. And what is that smaller algebra, and how do we do that, and how can we do it in a natural way? So, before I give you an actual recipe, let me still talk about the prequantization stage, which tells us in what sense is Kostant-Souriau natural, and in what sense is the metaplectic-c approach as natural as Kostant-Souriau. Why is it at least as natural as Kostant-Souriau? So that's the Kostant-Souriau, and this again, the reference would be a paper of Jennifer Bond. And looking at the time, I'm not going to so basically at this point, there's two more steps, and I'm not going to have time to do both of them. One of them is the prequantization step, where you do have a very natural action, but the space is too big. Or maybe a natural action on something from which you will want to build a space. And the second would be the quantization, where you actually build your Hilbert space. And that's the one where I'm kind of jumping up and down at what Harold Hess did back in the late 70s or so. But let me just go again. A certain distance. Let's work with the prequantization stage. What does Kostant-Souriau tell us? For Kostant-Souriau, let me work not with a line bundle, but rather with a principal circle bundle. It doesn't matter. You can go back and forth. Complex remission line bundles are as good as principal circle bundles. For Kostant-Souriau, you need a principal circle bundle with connection whose curvature is the symplectic form. I'm sorry? Oops, thank you. And then eventually, this is geometric. There's no vector space here, there's no Hilbert space. But of course, we know how it goes. Eventually, you're going to take an associated line bundle, and you're going to take the space of section. The space of all sections, that's the prequantization stage, and that's too big. But that's where everything is nice and beautiful. But the space of sections is associated, all the geometry is coming from the principal bundle. So we can start by talking about the notion of quantumorphisms, which I think is due to Souriau. This is just automorphisms of this prequantization structure, which by definition is diffeomorphisms, which are S1 equivariant. So this is a bundle automorphism, and preserve the one form. But on the base, it acts in an interesting way. On the base, this will act as a symplectic transformation. And then if you take the corresponding the algebra, if you take infinitesimal quantumorphisms, these are vector fields which are invariant under as the circle action and such that the lead derivative of gamma in the direction of that vector field vanishes, that turns out to be naturally isomorphic. That's the algebra of vector field, which turns out to be naturally isomorphic to the Poisson algebra. If you have a vector field psi will correspond to a function f, if and only if the vertical part of psi obtained by plugging it into the connection form is a pullback of f. So this is telling us that the algebra that we want to represent is acting very, very naturally on this geometric object, and that it will act naturally in any associated line bundle, therefore on the space of sections, and that's how you start to do prequantization. It turns out that you have a very, very similar thing for metaplectic-c, so it's not any worse than the Kostant-Souriau in that sense. Except in metaplectic-c, it will be less obvious what is the associated line bundle to take, and you need to make a choice before you can do that. You need to choose a so-called polarization for it to actually make sense of the bundle. So now we have the notion of MPC quantumorphisms.
So in there, the Hilbert space is the Lie algebra of that guy, the quantum.
No, the Hilbert space eventually, so at this point, this is the stage of prequantization. So a tentative version would be, so the Poisson algebra acts on this line bundle, and therefore it acts on any associated bundle, and therefore it acts on the space of sections, where L is just associated. And that's the guy that's too big. And then you after that you have to start making compromises. And here you're going to need to, what does it mean to be compromised? To compromise this, again, I think I'm running out of time, but for example, you might choose a complex structure and insist to only take holomorphic sections. Or you might want to choose a Lagrangian foliation and insist to only look at sections which are covariant constant along the leaves.
So what's happening is that this is the contactomorphism group, and it's infinite dimensional, and you want to extract a finite dimensional guy.
No. The problem with me is not with this being infinite dimensional, but with this being too big.
But that's because
This being too big.
Yeah.
And there's.
But that's because you're doing it's infinity sections. For L2.
That's right. And it turns out that you need to make certain choices to make that guy smaller, but those choices will require you to restrict to a smaller subalgebra. Again, I wish I had another half an hour because there's some beautiful details there. But those choices will require you to restrict to the the algebra of the Poisson algebra. But let me still talk about just kind of a nice analog of that. I think I sort of knew I was a little bit ambitious with time, so at least some pieces I'm showing you. So what are metaplectic-c quantumorphisms? These are again diffeomorphisms, which respect everything, but there's something a little bit subtle there. There's one more condition. You see, if you have a diffeomorphism, which is MPC of a variant, it descends. It can descend a little bit, or it can descend a lot. And this works already still at the level of vector bundles, but where do you remember that this was an actual tangent bundle, you insist that descending a little bit is the same thing as descending a lot, and then taking the so-called prolongation, the map induced as coming from the differentials, the maps downstream. And once again, on the pre-quantization stage, we have a similar phenomenon, which is kind of nice, which is telling us that this is going in the right direction. The fact that the infinitesimal automorphisms, or these are now vector fields rather than diffeomorphism, is exactly the Kostant algebra, where a vector field corresponds to a function, if it only is, well, the same condition. When you plug it in the central connection, it has to be the full-value of the function. So that's kind of nice. So let me say a few, so this is the pre-quantization stage. I think I do have another 4 minutes to say something about quantization. So I can try to say something about quantization and, you know, why am I happy with what we learned from Hess. On the left-hand side, this is all nice. Okay. But as I said, it's too big. So how do you shrink it so that what you get actually matches examples that you would like to model by this construction? There's a notion of a polarization, which by definition is a complex subbundle of the complexified tangent bundle, which is involutive. So the bracket of sections is a section, and it's Lagrangian, which is a fiber-wise condition. And two examples would be first of all, if you have a Lagrangian foliation, you can take F to be just the tangents to the leaves and complexify. And the second example is if you have a compatible complex structure and take F to be the complex span of del Zj bar, where Zj are complex coordinates. And this actually makes sense. This is independent of the choice of complex coordinates. And again, going back to the 1970s, you can then look at those smooth functions whose Hamiltonian flow preserves the polarization, and this guy will act on a space of sections which are covariant constant in the direction of a polarization. So in the first case, this is just, well, the condition for this being Lagrangian. Collation means that you've got a flat connection along the leaves, so you can make sense of sections horizontal along the leaves. In the second case, these will be just holomorphic sections. And I've cheated a little bit. Well, I haven't cheated because I do want to keep track of the half-form correction. So what we do here you have to take sections not of the original line bundle that I wrote down here, but rather of its tensor with k to the negative 1/2, where k was the top complex wedge of the polarization up to conjugate. So this guy has a connection. This guy doesn't have a connection, but it has a partial connection. It has also a bot connection in the directions defined along f. So this condition actually makes sense, even after we've done the half-word connection. And let me say the 1-minute version of what we learned from Haas for metaplectic-c. And also, since I'm sort of talking about the 1970s, there are some papers of some people in the 2000s that I think could be generalized by just going and sort of throwing in that Hess approach from the 70s. So it's not only stuck at the 70s. And again, I'm out of time, but let me say a word about the MPC version. Even in the classical version, you didn't quite make sense of which bundle are you taking sections of until you've had the polarization, because you're taking this half-form correction. And this is similar in the MPC version, where, again, since I'm out of time, so using the choice of polarization as constructs a bundle, and this bundle has, now this is a piece where Hess only hints. Hess does something a little bit different, but he says, oh, you could have also done it this way, and so I'm now talking about hints of Hess, which is a long graph. Hess does something a little bit different from this. And this is a complex line bundle. And the part of the Poisson algebra that preserves, did I give it a name? Yes. That preserves the polarization will in fact act on this complex line bundle in ways which respects everything is natural, and therefore acts on the space of sections which are covariant constant along the polarization. I think I'm 2.5 minutes late, so I better stop here.
So we still have time for a brief question or two. Any comments?
So I understand that the condition on omega, that is that the corresponding cohomology class satisfies, is a little weaker than the one.
Yeah.
Is there any other?
So a special case would be
CP.
like Kostant-Souriau plus half-form correction will be a special case, except this works in more situations such as CPN where n is equal.
But is there any other advantage?
I'm sorry?
Is there any other advantage to using this method besides relaxing the condition
Well,
on the cohomology?
people often forget this piece. This piece goes back to the 70s, but nowadays a lot of people sort of forget it. So again, when I talked about the ambiguity, what people mean when they say spin C quantization, that piece is often forgotten, and I think it. So, for example, let me give you Euler-Maclaurin, okay? Just as an analogy, okay? Here, let's take a polytope of one dimension, integral polytope, and then the length is equal to the number of lattice points minus 1, right? And let's take this guy, which starts at the n.5 point, and now the length is just the number of lattice points. So that's already nice. For example, if you want to do quantization combined with reduction, it has been established in the spin-C case by Paradin and Verne, so this does work. If you want to do versions of like Borel-Weybot, you sort of end up not having to deal with these funny shifts by half the sum of the positive roots. So it's aesthetically a little bit more.
Yeah, but all of that is the issue of tensoring in the half-form bundle.
Yeah,
what I was asking is, what is the advantage of going to the metaplectic-c rather than just doing Kostant-Souriau?
Well, it works in more situations.
You know,
I think the main, if you really want, for me, aesthetically, it's, yeah, you're right. If you do take care of tensoring with the half forms, then the only advantage is, well, two advantages, I would say. One of them is it works in more situations. Second, it keeps track of just the information that you need, because if you have if you do the tensor with the half forms, you're somehow keeping track of too much information in some sense.
I don't understand what you just said.
For example, if you have a line bundle with connection and a complex structure, if you look at Kostant's compatibility condition, he doesn't need the corresponding metric to be positive definite, for example, and then you have a lot of different combination of line bundle, comma, complex structure that would give you the same quantization. And somehow if you work with the line bundle together with a complex structure, you're keeping track of more information that you can actually detect by the quantization. So, and it's somehow in this version where the twist by half form is sort of comes at the beginning rather than at the end, you're keeping track of less information, but only the relevant information. I would call it aesthetic rather than, again, I think strictly speaking, yes, it's just because it works in all cases, but it's in some ways it's more aesthetic. Questions such as quantization commits reduction, you actually get a different mathematical question when you ask it for this guy than when you ask it without the half form correction. But yeah, you are taking half form correction, so I should not complain about that.
I mean, I think the half-form, at least for our generation, the half-form correction was always a standard part of it.
Yeah, but nowadays, nevertheless,
yeah.
People do work with the definition of spin-C quantization that does not involve it. When you do the index theoretic approach, Verne and Paradin and Verne do it, but like a lot of other people don't throw it in.
Yes.
So it somehow disappeared
in
some contexts. I'm sorry?
Let me consult with Eckhart about I think he's an advocate of throwing in the half-form correction.
I don't know, that's what we did.
Yes, no, maybe.
1973.
No, but like Eckhart's paper about quantization community reduction, does not have that extra, it's a beautiful stuff, right? It's a fantastic piece of work, but it does not have that extra shift, and then there's there's part of Verne that the question they're feeling is a little bit different, because it's the same quantization, but it's a different symplectic manifold, it's a different reduced space. So the questions are a little bit different.
Two versions and both lead to interesting results. So,
excuse me, what?
The two versions both lead to interesting
Yeah, I mean, both
results.
those versions it's fine. Both versions are legitimate, right? I mean,
Sure, of course.
But I'm just saying, there's a little bit of it's worth to be aware that these
But you have to shift by a hat by.
Well, maybe you don't have to, but just to keep an awareness of these two versions.
Is this related to the half densities that appear in the
Yes.
counterstock? And that's the reason why you put the case?
There's a relation between half forms and half densities.
Yes.
Roughly the same kinds of beasts. If there are no further questions, let's first of all thank the speaker for Denny and I want to thank all of you for coming to this marvelous conference. In particular, thank Shlomo for his presence here as well, which was absolutely crucial to everything.
strange feeling to be reminded of stuff I was doing 45 years ago.
But your comments have actually.
Yael's whole case is that stuff has not been replaced by improvements.
No, and I think, again, I do think that this stuff ties in with some recent stuff in ways that could be extremely interesting.
Yeah.
שלמה, שוב תודה לך. ואנחנו נפגש ביולי. זהו, אני חושבת שראוי שאני אנסה.